I think we're recording. All right. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another live session. We are covering Deliverable 6. Now, I will tell you, I put out an archive to um, something that says overview of white paper. You are going to want to review that, okay? Because this is a white paper, it's a formal document. There's a way you have to write this deliverable. And so you want to make sure to review the archive on that I placed in the course that says white paper. The other thing is, if you did not watch the first live session where I go over the content, you need to do that because there's some things that I only taught during that live session that directly applies to this, that I'm looking for, and that being the call cascade, and that being the disaster, the crisis management team. And I gave some very specifics in terms of what those roles are and who they are, and I want all of that in this deliverable because that's what we're assessing on, right? So I provided the disclaimer up top or up front. I will be looking for some very specific things for this, but please review the white paper. I'm not going to go over that again in this session. I did a separate session for that. All right, let me go ahead and share my screen and we will get to it. Are you able to see my screen? Are you seeing the deliverable guidance?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, here's our scenario. And remember, we have to write to the scenarios, right? But this one is a little fun. This one is fun. And for those of you, and I know we have a big student base that's in Florida. So many of you probably can relate to this, right? So you are the chief HR officer. So again, you're playing a leadership role for a credit union in the panhandle of Florida. For those of you who don't know what a credit union is, and that's going to be very important to this assignment, the type of business. Where the type of business wasn't as critical before, this one is very important because everything that you're going to be doing, you're going to be doing it with a bank in mind. So credit union is a bank. It's a smaller bank. It has members um, versus customers. They call it members, and they operate slightly different, but for all intents and purposes, it's a bank. Credit union is a bank. And so the board recently hired a new president who conducted a review of the current operational plans and procedures. And this president noted that the credit union does not currently have a documented disaster recovery plan in case of a natural disaster like a hurricane or a flood. And for those who already watched the first live session, you will know why that is like a no-no. Like that is a critical error. Every business has to have a disaster recovery plan. Every business has to have a business continuity plan. If not, any small or big disaster can put you out of business completely, right? And so this is a big, I mean, credit unions are smaller than banks, but they are banks. They, hold people's money, but they are smaller. And so what you're going to be doing for this assignment is developing a white paper. And I went over what a white paper is, but basically kind of outlining, this plan and what should be in place and bringing everything together. Okay, so here are the things that you're going to be measured on, and we'll go over, as usual, all of these steps in great detail. But this is what you're going to have to do. And so let's start out. The first thing is the white paper. I'm not going to go through everything because you're going to watch that live session. It's very formal. A white paper, was used as, really, it came about as shorthand for a government report, but it is a formal report. It's formal, one of the more formal documents that anyone can write. It is authoritative and it's informative in nature. So, when you're writing a white paper, it's usually used to kind of argue a specific position or propose a solution to the problem in a very formalized manner. Usually, a lot of research is brought in. The tone is very formal. It is a report that captures a lot of like the research, and it has its own flow. And so, because it's a white paper, I am going to be judging on your tone, your flow, your format. And so it addresses the audience, of the organization. And so this is a very formal document. Typically, the purpose of a white paper, as I put in my notes here, is really to advocate for a certain position. And so it's the best way to go about, solving a problem. And so usually it has to be a problem. It's authoritative. It's kind of influential in nature, and there's a problem. And for this deliverable, you have a big problem. You live in this bank is in Florida. And Florida is known for having, hurricanes and disasters, but they don't have a plan, right? Huge problem. So you're developing a white paper. You need a full introduction. Now, this is again, a formal document. I've been seeing some introductions be like 4 sentences and things like that. This is formal. A full introduction. Okay, full introduction. Think 6 sentences or more. I put some things in bold. I'm going to stress it 5 million times, because without a problem, you don't have a white paper, right? So your introduction should discuss the need for the disaster recovery plan, because again, this is authoritative, kind of argumentative in nature. So usually I don't guide your introduction, but for this to help you, I'm guiding your introduction. So this is what I'm going to be looking for. You need to discuss the need for this disaster recovery plan. Because this is a white paper, you must include the problem. Okay, so the introduction will be the best place to include the problem. We want a problem statement. I want it in my face. Slap me with the problem. And in order to slap me with the problem, I need you to state the words, the problem. What is it that I want you to do, Tony?
State the problem. I do
Yep.
have a question, Dr. Fisher. The problem is stated in the scenario, am I correct?
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Okay, so that's what I'm saying. We'll synthesize it, but I'm saying that's where we would get it from, right?
I mean, this is the problem. You bank. The problem is that you do not have a disaster recovery plan, and
Okay.
every business needs one, right?
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
so, and also, it's in an area that lends itself to hurricanes. You think
Or
you
flooding,
want
right?
a disaster recovery plan,
Yes,
right?
yes,
That is
yes.
that is like that is like having your business within 5 feet of a volcano with no plan in place in case the darn thing erupts.
Okay, it makes sense.
Yeah. So what we need is a couple things. The first thing you're going to need to do, and it doesn't have to be in this order, but your introduction is going to be graded. In your introduction, you need to discuss the need for the disaster recovery plan. And because this is a white paper, you must include explicitly the problem statement. The problem statement should state, as you are the HR and your audience, because it's a white paper, please review the criteria for a white paper, is a chief, your audience is the board of this bank. You're writing a white paper, letting them know that they have a problem. And you're going to say, in so many words, if I don't see the word problem in your introduction, you're not going to get full points. Kick it back. You need to let them know there's a problem. So I'm saying this a million times because as much as I've taught this course and I've said this 10 times, the last archive, I said it 10 times. I made the students repeat it 10 times. And there were still people who submitted it and there was no problem statement in the introduction. Then it's not a white paper, so you're going to get it back. The most you can get is a 2 without your problem. Got it? So I'm saying
Got it.
here for the world, the problem. You got to say the word problem. And then these are the things we need in the introduction. This is the only time that I'm telling you what to put in your introduction. The only time in the whole, out of all of the deliverables that I said what to put in your introduction, and I'm doing this because it's a white paper and I'm trying to help you, I'm guiding you. So, need for the disaster recovery plan in the introduction. I'm going to be looking for these specific things. I'm going to be going down the list. I'm going to have this open as I'm reading your paper, right? The problem statement. So, why isn't it? I need you to say in the introduction why it is important to have a disaster recovery plan in place, why it's needed, why is not having one a problem for the credit union. So I even guided this even more for you. Any questions?
No.
And you're going to have a full introduction. I don't want one sentence here and there, a full introduction. This is a very formalized document. It is a white paper. All right. Next, you have to state the goals of a disaster recovery plan. Because this is a white paper, this should be written in paragraph format with formal tone and no bullets. We want 0 bullets in your white paper. Okay? If I see bullets, for this section, you're not going to get full credit. So, paragraph format. And I need you to include everything that I have here. So, what will be the goals of the credit union's disaster recovery plan? Well, I have a live session talking about disaster recovery plan and the goals of them. It's already posted. So, what's the goals of the disaster recovery plan? Generally, it's to ensure that the business can continue, right? Can carry on with the critical elements of the business despite the disaster. We talked about this in business continuity, right? So review the live sessions. So what would be the goal of the credit union's disaster recovery plan? What will the plan accomplish? For example, what is the scope? So this is going to be a very detailed section. Okay, so you know, a detailed section. So what's the scope? What will the plan cover? Will it cover, the bank itself? Will it cover the employees that may get hurt, right? Specific departments or operations? I gave you a lot of hints because I gave you who needs to be on your committee, right? I gave that in your crisis management team during the live session, didn't I, Tony?
Yes.
So it would be smart, since we listed those people, to include those departments here. So talk about what will it cover, right? Don't just list it out. It'll cover the bank itself. Boom. It's going to cover employees. Boom. No. It's a white paper. So the goals of the disaster recovery plan is this. The plan will accomplish, the goals is this. The plan is to ensure that all of our lines of business, we're able to carry on, that we're able to function, bring in that language I talked about in terms of the critical point, the RTO, the recovery point, all of these things I talked about in the live session. I want to see it synthesized. And then you'll talk about the plan will ensure that we have appropriate procedures in place to handle any damage to our facilities. The reason why this is important is because of this. We also have to keep our staff and our employees in mind, during a hurricane, even if they're not at the bank. During the time of the hurricane, we have to make sure that we have plans in place in terms of how they're going to operate remotely, return to work information. I'm going off the top of my head. You're going to finesse it more than that, right? Then we have, our operations, blah, 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 blah. We have our customers to think about. We have our IT equipment to think about. What is the scope of this plan? Is your plan for, emergencies? What if there's hackers in the system now that they know that things are down, gaining access to customer accounts and information? But I gave you the departments in the live session, but you just need to talk and expand on it What will your plan cover? For this section, it'll be important to be clear about what the plan is for, the scope, and I just talked you through the scope, and what it will cover. This is a white paper. You need in-text citations throughout this whole thing because it's research-based. White papers are research papers. Usually I'm like, oh, you're good with 2 references. This is not the one for that. You want to make sure that you have all academic references for this, journal articles, textbooks. For this one, I want no websites because it's a white paper. So students understand that. You need in-text citations. You'll be bringing through your research. Do not use me as your source. I'm the teacher, but this is research, right? You're supplementing what you've learned and what I taught you with what you're able to research and synthesize. So don't say Fisher 2021 Rasmussen University live session. No, 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 no. I'm I'm not a reference source. I'm the teacher. It's my job to break information down for you, but it's your job to be a scholar. And I've been seeing that in a lot of the papers, and I haven't said anything about it. But for this one, I'm going to be strict. For your deliverable 7, where you're going to tie everything together, none of that. You are a scholar. You can research, you can take what I teach you and research the information to help you to further learn and further explore the topic and further to understand the theories and concepts. And that's what you bring into your writing. So as much as I love, you said, Dr. Fisher said this and quote, it's not how it works in, with your school papers. I'm flattered, but that's just not, how it works. So I put even in yellow here. So this is the section where you identify the key personnel who will implement the plan. I gave this to you, students. I gave it to you. Don't work so hard. Well, this is a recording. Definitely work hard, but don't be smart about it. I gave this to you in the live session, so you're going to break my heart if you get this section wrong, because I'm going to know unequivocally that you did not listen to the whole live session. Because I gave it to, I even struggled to put it on the whiteboard, didn't I, Tony? I'm like, I got to find a way to get my copy.
You did. Yes, ma'am.
So if you get this one wrong, know that Dr. Fisher's heart is just going to be broken. I'm going to probably be crying tears as I'm grading. Like, you didn't listen. You didn't read the live session. So please, please, please watch the live session. I know I could be long-winded, but that one is only like 40-something minutes. So watch it all the way through and take notes so you can fly through this deliverable. So while you're going to be doing research to help you, Dr. Fisher, I like giving lots of like hints and freebies. I'm horrible at an Easter egg hunt because the eggs will be like sticking up somewhere. That's just my personality. So I give it to you. I don't want you to struggle through this. Some of this stuff, if you were just to read the instructions and just like, I got it, I got the rubric, I could do it on my own, you're going to miss the boat because this is school. So the whole purpose of these assignments is to assess your learning on what was taught. So in order to do it, you gotta listen to the sessions because I'm teaching it to you. So I gave you the key personnel. I want all of those people because it's relevant to this bank, all of those departments. So use what I gave you. I'm gonna be looking for I think I gave how many?
It was about, I think it was about 6 or 7.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
You need 6 or 7 departments. And I gave them to
Executive
you.
leadership.
Don't tell
Don't
them.
give them.
Read
Okay.
through the last. I gave, but you see, she was about to roll it off her tongue. I gave you the departments. So
You did.
discuss who will sell, and I told you who usually leads it. I told you the role that they play. I gave it all to you. So you're gonna break it down. Don't just list it. Again, don't just list it in no bullets. You're gonna break it down as it relates to your bank. So discuss who will lead the project and why. Remember that this person will serve as the business continuity manager. So with that, you're going to say such and such. You don't have to give a name. I'm talking about a position. And I even in that live session told you for the credit union, for the bank, who it is. Don't tell it. I told you who it is. I told you who that person was. I told you exactly who to put as a business continuity manager. Didn't I say it, Tony? I said you're going to put
You
this
did.
person. So I'm going to know, students. I'm going to know. So discuss who will lead the project and why, based on the bank. Remember that this person will serve as the business continuity manager and is responsible for successful completion of the project. They are the keeper of the plan. Go back to the first live session for this week, and I told you who that should be for this bank. And you're going to say, this person, so this person, so not the name, but what their title is, will serve as the business continuity manager because blah, blah, blah. And then you're going to go down the rest of the departments and why they will be important and what they will do, right, in case of this disaster, why they're important to have on the team. And I kind of told it to you. Okay. And kind of, I did tell you, but make it relevant to the bank. Okay. So that you can use your own, tie it in. Don't just verbatim state exactly what I stated. Put it in your own words, but tie it to the scenario. This is a bank. So, tie it to the scenario. Next, based on the scope of the plan, because you gave the scope here, and what it'll cover, because you gave it here. So based on what you put above, you need to discuss the team that will work together to complete the project. Again, I gave it to you. Discuss why you selected these departments. Why were they the best choice? So I want you to talk about both of these. Why you selected them. Then I need to know why they were the best choice. Remember, both the technical and political considerations are important in selecting the team that can successfully develop your continuity and disaster recovery plan. And so I gave this to you. You're just going to have to expand on it in your own words, tie it to the scenario, but I'm going to be looking for the departments that I gave to you. And I'm going to be looking for you to identify the person as the business continuity manager who I told you will always be the business continuity manager in a bank situation. Got it?
Got it.
All right. So based so far, Tony, how easy do you think this is going to be based on what you learned from the live session so far?
I think just tailoring it and putting it in our own words is all we're gonna have to do
Pretty
so
easy,
far.
right? I gave it
Yes,
to you.
so far. Yes, yes.
But don't break my heart, students. Don't break my heart. Okay. So now the next section, and remember your tone and everything because it's a white paper. You're not going to use the words you, me, I, us. Right. So now you're going to provide the procedures to be used in the disaster recovery. So now you're going to describe your plan, the step-by-step procedures that are going to take place in order if the disaster occurs. Remember, this is a procedure. It's based on the specific disaster. If you do not talk about the call cascade in this section, you're not going to pass the section. The call cascade is a very important part of this procedure, and I went over it in a lot of detail during the live session, so you're going to have to pull that in. It's not the only procedure, but you are a bank. So imagine for this, you are the bank, you know a hurricane is coming. What will be so you've talked about your plan, so now you're describing the plan. You are describing the disaster recovery. This is step-by-step procedures that are going to take place in order if the disaster occurs. You've already outlined the team. You already know the call cascade, but what will be the procedures, right? Tony in the last live session talked a lot about what her organization did in light of COVID. But you're going to, talk about the plan. Think about these departments. Think about, okay, the bank, there's a hurricane. Again, you have, the building to think about. You have employees to think about. You have customers. Customers are going to be nervous because, if they're in the same area, they have to get to their money. What if there's systems failures? You got to think through your IT stuff. You got to think through how you're going to communicate with the customers. I need you to describe a call cascade here as part of your procedures. That's a mandatory, that's a must. So go back to the live session. You have to talk about, even just, hopefully people would have cleared out before the hurricane, that you're not working on the day of the hurricane. But for your disaster, if the disaster occurs, even if someone's there, what happens? What happens to cash? What happens to money? This is a bank, so it has to be relevant to the bank. Make sense? So what are the sequenced step-by-step activities that are going to take place? This is probably going to be the area where you're going to have to put the most thought to, but you already have probably a third of it done through the call cascade that I went over and taught to. And I need you to try to bring that in here as well. Any questions?
I would just add, I guess, the importance of who's on the team, right? Those different
Yeah,
departments. And
yeah.
then you just would assign the tasks
Who's
per
gonna do
the
what?
people on those teams according to what they specialize in, so to speak,
Look
without.
at you, Tony, with your synthesizing. That's what it's all about, bringing it together. Because this white paper builds. Remember, this is to the board of directors. It's very formal. It could be, this is the plan. So this section builds. So this section builds on this section, right? This
Yes.
section builds on this section. So Tony
Yes.
gave you the passcode. She unlocked it for you. She unlocked it for you. She gave you the passcode, the key. She unlocked the box for you. So there you go. Okay. The rest is going to be very easy. So this part, you're going to detail the procedures to be used to test the plan. So you have your plan. So we talked about that in the live session. So this is the plan. You've not had to execute it yet because there was no plan in place. You just wrote your white paper detailing this plan, but we test the plan to ensure that any kinks are worked out ahead of time. In my live session, I used an analogy like, you don't wait for the fire to happen to see if your fire drill works. I mean, to see if your fire plan works. You test the plan. And I talk about this in part 2 of the live session, disaster recovery. But remember when you were at school, even now in your workplace, there's a plan for in case there's a fire. Almost every business has it. If not, they don't have a disaster recovery plan. Shame on them. But you do. You have fire drills. Why do you have fire drills? The drill is the test of the plan that the business has outlined. Okay, we're going to exit left. This part of the building exits right. Here are the 2 exits. We line up. Peter, we account for everybody, blah, blah, blah. So that during the drill, if it doesn't go smoothly, then, okay, we saw where there's possible problem here. This entryway can get bottlenecked and someone can get hurt because during the drill, someone got hurt. Let's fix it and rewrite, let's make an alteration to the plan and then we test it again, right? Remember your tornado drills. Remember this. So for your disaster recovery, I gave you some hints here, right? How will you test your plan to ensure that it'll work and that the steps aren't left out or steps that need to be revised? You need to discuss what your process will be for testing a plan. I gave you some hints. Will there be a simulation or a drill? If so, state that and talk about your simulation or drill and why you selected that. Will you have other people or other departments test the plan or as part of the test of the plan? Talk about this. So I'm pulling these questions so that you can pull this out of you and have a rich section to talk about, right? And will there be software to test the plan too? You might have all 3, but talk about them. What is how, based on the bank and these things, how will you test the plan? And most times when you test it, there's always something off. A lot of times plans have to be tested several times before it's perfect. Before you feel confident or the organization feels confident, okay, if this happens, we're solid. I'll tell you with COVID, because it was so new, a lot of the plans around COVID were new. They were coming up with them, right? And those plans, and I was part of it, I was one of the business continuity managers. Those plans changed so many times based on tests, based on live things. I mean, unfortunately for us, the tests were live as people were getting sick and things like that. And we had to, keep making updates and changes and this and that. And now this is based on the information that we've known. But I'll tell you, probably by the time, pandemic disaster plans is a new thing, but I can tell you probably within the next couple years, it's solid. We'll be ready for a pandemic. Hopefully it never happens again, but another one, we got plans. A lot of colleges that were not remote figured out how to function remotely. High schools and grammar schools, K-12, figured out how to function remotely in case of an emergency. They now have this as part of their plans, and it's been tested several times. Unfortunately, a lot of it was live tests. But imagine when you're watching your favorite show and you get this blue thing across your screen right as your show is getting good, and it's like, this is a test. This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. The reason there's testing, and you're like throwing shoes at the screen, they're testing for in case, and it says it. It was just the other day, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had a screenshot for this lecture. It says across the emergency thing, at least mine did, it said disaster. It was so clear. It was like disaster recovery on the screen as part of their emergency broadcast, because in case the world is coming to the end, broadcasting, right, and sending those signals is a way to communicate with people. And that was part of the plan in case of a disaster and emergency. So you have to figure out how you're going to test it. Any questions there?
No, not at all.
Okay. Last section before your conclusion. And if you don't have a conclusion in your white paper, you're going to get it kicked back. Okay. It's white paper. But now you have to demonstrate the financial risk of not having a disaster recovery plan. So here's what you need to include, and you need to include all of this. Discuss the possible financial implications of not having a plan in place if this disaster occurs, right? So the disaster that you've outlined in the scope area, what's the financial implications? So who will be impacted? We should discuss that. How will that impact the credit union from a financial standpoint? For example, will time lost cost the company money? What about operation shutdown? Because you already talked about all of this up here. Think about the employees and those costs. Think about the cost of additional resources that will be involved due to lack of preparedness. So if you had no plan in place and a hurricane came, did major damage to the building, then took, the cash that was laying around out, the system shut down, there was no way to communicate with customers. Think about this. You are a bank. Customers rely on banks for their money. If there is a national disaster or something that happens in that area that impacts these customers, because they're also impacted by a hurricane, and now they don't have access to their financial resources because the bank wasn't prepared, what are the implications to those customers? And how does that impact the bank? Number one, you can imagine how they're going to be coming after you. Hope all that FDIC insurance is there. Number two, they will likely pull out the first chance they get all of their money from your credit union because you left them hanging high and dry. Your systems were down. There was no communication. So now you can't function. You're losing money. Your employees, now you think about your employees. How do you have a plan in place for, how they can still get paid? Are they, even though there's a disaster, they're still employees. If your systems aren't working, how does that impact them? Payroll, this and that. If you have no plan in place, how does it impact the building? Will people still be in the building? Can people get hurt? If they get hurt on the job, how does that financially impact you and your business and your operations? Also, you know, if you don't have a plan in place in case of an emergency and you have to go to the live session when I talk about RTO and all of that stuff, you know, in terms of that critical point that you need to get back up and running, even if it's from a remote location, if you miss the boat on that, then your business is not up and running. What are the financial implications of this? Not only do you have probably a national disaster going on, you have an internal disaster going on. You need to talk about all of that. Build this section out. I gave you a lot of hints here. Make sure you talk about these areas. Think this through. But if you are not prepared for a disaster, especially as a bank, you're going to have some bad stuff coming your way, and it's going to hit you financially. It might put you out of business. So make it make sense based on the credit union, and then your conclusion, you want to make sure to wrap everything together. I put some language here about this being the white paper. Then I highlighted use journals. Okay? Use journals. It's a white paper. Use academic journals. Cite your sources correctly, use Noodle tools. I put what you should have for your journals and an early announcement in weeks 1 or 2. Go back through that. I listed out everything that you need to put in Noodle tools for your journal entry. So that's in there. You have to have in-text citations. So everything here, right? So white paper, I put an exclamation point. They are heavily based on research. Your sources have to be really, really, really you want them academic, you want them appropriate, and you need to use them. This is a research paper for all intents and purposes. Your tone, all of that. Any questions? So I don't want to see websites for this one. Any questions?
No
Pretty clear?
questions? Yes.
All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, those that are listening in or watching the archive, feel free to reach out to me. We'd love to help you. You're going to recycle a lot of this for Deliverable 7. So you want it right. Deliverable 7's worth almost a third of your grades, 28%, almost 30%. I will tell you, if you get even a B as in boy, on your Deliverable 7, if you had an A in a course, it's going to pull it down to a B. So you want, you know, I'll talk about Deliverable 7 next week, but this is one that you'll be recycling a lot of the information. So you want it accurate. So I gave you the plan, the blueprint, in order to kind of get it right. But you're going to want to watch the live sessions before this, for this one. Okay. Well, I'm around if you need me. You know where to find me. If you have any questions, reach out to me. And have a great rest of your week.